like I knew in my head, it's like, yeah, everyone's got their own problems and whatever. But I watched a lot of like philosophical and very like existential. They kind of talked about our place in the universe, how insignificant we are, and kind of what that means. That kind of idea, it was like, I understand that everything's meaningless, but everyone else, they're like, they don't get it, they're just like running around and doing their thing and having their problems. And I kind of felt like I was like almost like a superiority complex. It's like, I understand that everything's meaningless and you guys don't. And I kind of let that take a hold of me and separate me from everybody else. And so I kind of let that stay in my head, and it ended up becoming a huge problem for me because I needed to go to God just as much as the next person. And even if I was dealing with some bigger questions, I needed to bring those bigger questions before God in equal humility to someone who's like having a bad day, and bring that before God, right? Either way, I need to be completely humble and completely open when I'm giving it up to God.
Often I wonder about my place in this vast universe. I am smaller than a grain of sand in our galaxy, which is smaller than a grain of sand in our continually expanding universe. Yet, despite how tiny I am, I, along with everyone else, experience emotions and thoughts that seem to be so incredibly significant. We long for meaning, connection, and to understand the depth of our existence. But why is that? Why do we naturally gravitate towards the idea that our lives matter and that we should search for purpose and meaning? Something within us, deep down, tells us that we are significant. Perhaps because we were made to be this way? Could this feeling be tied to the image of God that lives in us? Today, we will dive into this idea, exploring the bigger picture and our position as a human race in this vast universe.
I like to base my faith and my understanding of reality on what is most likely to be true.
All God wants is your heart. He just wants a relationship with you.
Now we just immediately change our perspective. Like, okay, then that's science is just the explanation of how that God decided to make the world.
What comes out of us when we are squeezed is a lot of what's in our heart.
Sam, welcome to Meaning Unseen podcast.
Thank you.
It's really nice to have you here. I'm excited to dive deep today into the question of what is actually that bigger picture. But before we get into that, I want to hear your story. What I know is you grew up in a Christian family, but about 2 summers ago, I think you said, something sort of drastically changed in your perspective of God. Can you tell me what changed?
Yeah. So 2 summers ago, I was in the counselor and training program at Red Rock, which is a Bible camp that I've been to my whole life. And at the time, I was struggling with a lot of mental health stuff, a lot of like depression and anxiety and things like that. And it had really affected my perception, I think, especially of the church, because I didn't really feel like I had anywhere to go with my thoughts and my feelings that were kind of, I felt were like against God, but it was really just me being anxious, like raising my hands in worship. And then I would feel like, oh, that's like me being against God or something like that. Even though my desire is to know God, these things that were like stopping me, like my anxieties and things like that, it made me feel like I was kind of separated. I didn't feel like I had anywhere to go to talk about that. And so it kind of left me feeling like I was kind of disconnected from the church, and I wasn't really a part of the community because I was dealing with these like anxious thoughts and these depressive thoughts. And it felt like the church was kind of a place, it was like everyone's supposed to be joyful and whatever. And I now know that was not what anyone was trying to like give off that impression, but that's kind of how it felt to me. And so going to this counselor and training program, I was surrounded by a lot of people my age who really wanted to get to know God. But the thing that stuck out to me the most was how everyone had different imperfections, right? And it wasn't just me, because going into there, it was like, it felt like I was the only one who was like, didn't feel like a good enough Christian, or like I was the only one who didn't measure up. And so for me, that kind of community aspect of being like, yeah, we're all flawed. It's okay. We're going to try to be joyful. And that really, really changed how I thought about God and how I thought about being a Christian and what that means like for me personally. So, yeah.
Did your anxiety have something like had to do directly with God, or was it separated and it sort of affected your faith in the process?
Yeah, I think it was kind of like a separate thing. Like I was anxious, and that kind of just affected all aspects of my life. And so in that way, it affected my relationship with God. But for me, that was the way that felt most significant, because I knew in my mind that was the most important thing, was my relationship with God. And so when I felt like there was that disconnect, I felt like shameful almost, right? And I didn't bring that to God. I just let that shame sit. And so that's kind of why it was such a big deal.
Like, did you feel disconnected from God, seeing anxiety and seeing God and being like, oh, the two don't match type of thing?
For me, like, I think it was very much, personal thing, like kind of like you were saying, like anxiety and God, like they don't go together. And so in my brain, I was like, oh God, this must be a bad thing. But the biggest thing was just, I think I felt like I had to be perfect before God, which is like a huge misconception, because he knows it all anyway, right? He knows my heart, he knows my mistakes, and so he will change my heart over time if I surrender these thoughts and these feelings to him. But at the time, I felt like because I had these anxious thoughts, these anxious feelings, that was like a reason for me to kind of separate myself from God. So it was more my own doing. It was like I let my sin and I let my mistakes like kind of become a big deal, and I kind of attached my identity, like, oh, I'm an anxious person, and it's like anxiety's bad. It's like, I guess that means that God thinks I'm bad, right? And just I let those thoughts fester. And I think that's the biggest thing, was just having that time of community, especially at CIT, and moving forward just with like mentorships and stuff like that, having time to be honest about what I was going through, even if it felt like, oh, this is like super sinful, or oh, this is like not what God would want, but being honest with my feelings and being honest with the fact that I'm trying. So that's the biggest thing that really changed for me, I think.
So you seeked that counseling opportunity because of how you're feeling?
Yeah. Like counseling, like in terms of like mentorship and stuff like that?
Yeah, it's because you were talking about that specific environment where you got to hear other people speak about their experiences, and you're like, wow, everybody feels similarly, right? Everybody's struggling with their own thing, and maybe I don't need to fix myself before going to God.
Yeah. For me, I kind of like I knew in my head, it's like, yeah, everyone's got their own problems and whatever. But at the time, I was like, I watched a lot of like videos and stuff like that were very like philosophical and very like existential, and they kind of talked about like our place in the universe, how insignificant we are, and kind of what that means. And so that kind of idea, it was like, it kind of made me feel like, oh, I understand that everything's meaningless, but everyone else, they're like, they don't get it, they're just like running around and doing their thing and having their problems. And I kind of felt like I was like almost like a superiority complex. It's like, I understand that everything's meaningless and you guys don't. And I kind of let that take a hold of me and separate me from everybody else and be like, I'm different. Like, you can have your problems, you can bring those problems before God, but like, I'm kind of different. I get it in a way that you don't. And so I kind of let that kind of stay in my head, and it ended up becoming a huge problem for me, because I needed to go to God just as much as the next person. And even if I was dealing with some bigger questions, I needed to bring those bigger questions before God in equal humility to someone who's like having a bad day, and bring that before God, right? Either way, I need to be completely humble and completely open when I'm giving it up to God. So I think hearing other people share about their experiences, the biggest thing was realizing the motivation behind them. Like, I would hear someone say something, and in my mind, it's like, oh, that's like not a big deal at all. But they would worry about it a lot. And that worry is the thing that they needed to bring before God, right? Like, also the issue, but the heart of it was the worry. And I felt that worry for much bigger things. Like, I was worried about like, what if there is no God? What if there is no meaning to the universe? But that worry was the thing that I needed to bring before God, right? The worry was the same. And so I think that's kind of the biggest thing that made me realize that, yeah, I need to talk through my problems just as everybody else does, and seek out like mentorship and stuff like that, because I realized that that step of humility wasn't a step of weakness, but it's a step of learning, right? Of showing God, hey, I know you're in charge, and so I want to learn from you. So that's kind of, I'm not sure if that exactly answers the question. But
No, it does. I really relate with something you said there about how you feel like you grasped this idea that nobody else grasped, and it like makes you disconnected from all humanity. You're like, just wanna, because you're like, they don't get it, which makes you feel misunderstood or not understood at all, I guess. And it causes this gap to appear between you and people. And I do feel that often.
Yeah.
But like you said, it's like showing up. Well, if we really see the entire picture, right? Like, God loves all these people, that he died for them, the same that he did for me, right? Like, as much as things are vanity, as we were gonna get into later, everything is there for a reason as well, right?
Yeah.
I relate to feeling disconnected from people just because I feel like I got a grasp on this idea, while other people didn't quite get it, you know? Like, even this God, like the existence of God, right? Like, I feel him so much in my life. Like, I've looked at evidence and all this stuff, but for other people, the fact that they can't see that sometimes could cause some disconnection.
You know, the thing for me, whenever I have like thoughts and feelings like that, which is pretty frequently, it depends on the stage of my life, but why do I care, right? Why do I care in this? Why does it bug me now that they don't get it, and not like yesterday, you know? And I realized that actually at the end of the day, a lot of that is just my motivation. Like, I'm just anxious, and so I feel like I need fulfillment. So I'm like, I want people to understand or whatever. But like, if you think about it, like, if you truly have just the joy of the Lord, it's like you can want people to follow him, right? And you want people to understand on a deeper level, but it's not going to be with the same like emotion, the same like urgency, like, oh, I'm annoyed at them because they don't get it or whatever.
Yeah.
Because that's almost how I felt sometimes. It was like a disconnect. It was like someone would say something and I would be like, oh yeah, it's like they don't see the bigger picture. And it's like who am I to say that? You know, like I'm not God. And so that's
exactly,
yeah,
like we don't see the bigger picture, right? If
Yeah.
we really saw the bigger picture, like from every angle, we would know that this is a part of this world's brokenness, right? That some people just did not come to know God yet, right?
Yeah.
And we would approach that whole situation in a very, very different way, right? So back to the misconceptions that you had about God in that period of your life, if you could say it in like a word, like a characteristic about God, what did you see that actually wasn't true? Like, was it really about how you viewed God, or was it just not knowing yourself good enough? Like, what was the gap?
I think it was just the idea that God was impersonal. That's kind of how I thought. I thought there was like the mental, psychological level where it's like I can puzzle through all these things and I can be like, God may exist, God doesn't exist, whatever. I can be like, I have scientifically or archaeologically proven that Jesus lived or all these events happened, and that's like on this level, and that's like the God level, right? That's like I grew up singing the songs, whatever. It's like it's in my brain, right? And then there's the level of like how I act and how I feel every day. And those are like two totally different, like didn't feel connected at all type of things. And so I felt like I could come to God with my like big questions, but I couldn't come to him with my feelings. And that was more the thing, was when I was having these big feelings, is like I didn't have any practice bringing feelings to God, because in the past they weren't big, so I had no reason to. It felt like I could just deal with it on my own. But then when I had these big feelings, I had no practice bringing them to God, and so then it kind of became like I guess God doesn't want this, right? This isn't how my relationship with God was growing up, and so I kind of pigeonholed the relationship with God to just what I had experienced already, as opposed to thinking like maybe it's worth trying praying about my anxiety or my depression, and that was a process for sure, because I was still like, there were times I would cry out to God in hard moments, but there's something about doing that doing that regularly, and the idea of like kind of reminding yourself of those truths, and in every moment giving it up to God. And that was an aspect that I was really lacking. It really felt like the Sunday service. I knew all the answers. Everything else, it was like I'm just living life and insecure and looking at my neighbor to see what they're doing, and I'm not actually turning to the Bible. So
in that process of questioning whether you should go with your feelings to God, do you think there was a part of you that was questioning whether he exists? Because I know you're saying like you had that part. Yeah, like what I've learned growing up, that was, the foundation was there, but it's just the practicality of everything else was not there. Or was it really like an issue of belief, or like believing that God could actually take these emotions and do something with them?
Yeah, I think fundamentally it was an issue of belief, because I would see something, like I would feel like I'd go through a day and I'd feel like whatever, like I did a normal day, feel relatively confident in my decisions, whatever, and then I'd like watch a YouTube video about like how meaningless life is, and how every little thing, it's like you might have done it for good, but it's like I don't know, like you give money to somebody on the street, and then that money's went and used for drugs, right? And that's kind of how I felt like all my actions were, because I was like, I can't know what if my actions are going to do good, right? Like maybe I meant something for good and it totally turned out wrong. So it's like, what is even the point of trying? And so I kind of got to a point in my head where I was like, fundamentally, there's no way for us to know if there's a God or not. And so I kind of went to that perspective, and then I was like, well, okay, I've lived my entire life as a Christian. Like, what does this mean? And so it kind of came to like, well, okay, I forget. There's some word for it. Some like philosopher or something said it, but like, if we can never know if there's a God or not, may as well believe in God, right? May as well try. Best case scenario, you go to heaven. Worst case scenario, you disappear, right? And nothing exists. And so that's kind of the stance I had, which is not a real belief system at all. And I think kind of what I've learned is you have to give God something in order for him to work, right? For me, it was kind of like I would sit there, I would stand back, no emotional skin in the game. Like I didn't give anything to God. And so I was kind of like, well, guess we can't know God exists, right? But the moment that I tried and I was like, I gave something up to God, like he made a change, right? And there was no way for me to know that. It's like the idea of like peace that transcends all understanding, right? It's like there was no way mentally I could like puzzle that through without trying, right?
Yeah.
And so that was kind of another thing of the humility aspect of realizing like, yeah, I can have all these big thoughts, and maybe I've thought more about moral principles than the next person, but in order to actually grow as a person and grow in the fruits of the Spirit and grow in strength, I need to put something. I need to give God something, right? I need to give him room to work almost. So
was this a gradual change, would you say, or was it sort of like an instant or a few days that were like, oh wow, I've been getting this whole thing wrong?
Yeah, for me, I think there was that the CIT time was the biggest time for me, because I'd been questioning before, and I mean I was questioning after, but the idea that it was true and that I actually believed it came like right around that time where it became personal, and I actually like felt God and I felt he was real was when I gave him something, and whether that was just my time, because I feel like he was ultimately very gracious to me, because I did not give him much in that time, and he gave me so much in terms of peace and joy. But I think the biggest thing for me was just kind of being in a new situation, right? Being at camp with a group of peers it was totally different than my normal life. And so I couldn't just default to like my normal assumptions, my normal thoughts, whatever, because I was in a totally new situation. And so it kind of tested me in a lot of ways. And what I came through seeing was that the only constant is God, right? Like I had relied so much on like, I don't know, people at school, my friends at school being like nice to me, or like people giving me some sort of social satisfaction, whatever. And then I'm in a place where it's like a few people that I know, but almost nobody, right? It's like mainly new people. I got to make new connections, whatever. And so there's no that social aspect isn't a constant, and all these other things that I kind of relied on, I realized they weren't constant, and it kind of broke me down. But then I kind of realized it was like God has been here the whole time, right? And I can always trust him because he is not circumstantial, right? And so it was kind of like I was being hypocritical. I was like, oh, nothing matters, whatever. You need to just be confident, and because none of it matters, so just make your own way, whatever. But then I was relying on these social or whatever kind of like crutches to fulfill myself. So I think that's kind of the point where kind of the head knowledge and the actual like what I do in my day to day kind of came together. And for me, the biggest transforming aspect was the book of Ecclesiastes in the Bible in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. It's a great book. For anybody who doesn't know, Ecclesiastes was written by Solomon, King Solomon, who had asked God, or God had asked him, what do you want out of this life? And he asked for wisdom. And God gave him wisdom. And he wrote multiple books in the Bible. And this Ecclesiastes focuses on this idea that the emptiness that comes when you try to find happiness apart from God. And that nothing, no prestige, no money, no pleasure will satisfy a God-shaped void inside your hearts but God. So it's a really beautiful book. We definitely wanted to go into it a little bit today.
Yeah.
Do you want to summarize it in 3 words?
Yeah.
Literally,
yeah.
The 3 words that are said the most often in that whole...
Like, everything is meaningless is pretty much the...
Depression.
Yeah.
Like, I read that and I'm like thinking, this is really like, this is hard to take in, you know, like you're telling me nothing might, but even he's talking about it, right? Even he's saying, I hated life when I realized that this is all vanity. I hated life when I realized that I'm doing all of this work, and I'm actually not getting a whole lot from it. You know, I'm going to leave and I'm going to die one day as king, and the next king that's going to come, he's going to do his own thing. Maybe he's a good king, and maybe he's not. Maybe he'll destroy everything I did.
Yeah.
And it definitely makes you think, but most importantly, makes you realize how these pleasures are truly not, like, we should not hold on to them at all.
Yeah. And Solomon, he almost takes it to the extreme in a way that we can't really like fathom. Like he was not only king, but he was immensely wealthy, like wealthier than any other king before him. And he had like, he knew the right thing to do because God had given him this wisdom, right? This knowledge that was like practically applied. And so he had like a lot of the answers, and he knew how to build a kingdom, how to build wealth, when to store and when to spend and whatever that was. And so for us, it's not like just some guy like, I don't know, in the wilderness being like, oh, I'm just looking around and I see everything's meaningless. He's like, he was on the top of the world. Like there was nobody above him. Like he had more gold. Like it says in his time, silver was worthless because of how much gold there was in his kingdom, which is like absolutely like worthless, like completely worthless. And it's like, he kind of takes it to the full extreme where we can say it's like, oh, I see that things are meaningless, whatever. But like he knew, like he had it all. It's easy. It's almost like seeing celebrities and they're like chasing after whatever, and they get everything they want, and then they realize that they're on top of the world and they're all alone, right? They're all empty. And so Ecclesiastes is a very cool book for that. And I remember when I started like reading Ecclesiastes, like reading the Bible was hard for me at the time because I always felt like guilt, like that whole like disconnect from God thing applied to my Bible and my devotional life too, because I felt like no matter what I did, it wasn't enough. It was like, oh, if I'm going to read the Bible, I should read the whole thing, and I need to get 100% into it. Otherwise, I'm like kind of I'm being fake. I'm not being like a real Christian. So then I never started, right? And it was always kind of a thing of guilt. But when I started reading Ecclesiastes, the people who were around me, they were just like they thought I was a little bit nuts. Like I think that's a good question. It may have been at CIT, or it may have been at home, like talking to my parents and stuff like that. Because they saw a very big change in me as well, and I was a lot more open with my parents after that. But I think it started at CIT because people like kind of thought I was a little bit nuts because they would see me reading this stuff, and they would read it and they'd be like, "This is just depressing, you know. This is just like sad, whatever." And for me, it was like,
this is amazing.
It was joy giving. It was like, it was mind blowing to me that something like this was in the Bible, right?
Yeah.
Because I saw the church, especially at the time, as just like we kind of just pretend everything's fine and whatever. And I didn't really see the part where people were like resolving problems and like loving each other and whatever. And I didn't really see that. Didn't really seep into my brain. But yeah, it's just such a huge aspect of Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The first time I read it, I was actually on a plane, and I started with that like first chapter, and I was like, "Oh my goodness, this is good!" Especially the last verse of the first chapter. In much wisdom is much grief, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. And that, like, I've consistently struggled with this idea of God. Like, the more I think about things, the more sad life becomes. And I don't know if I want that. I don't know if I want a brain that thinks so much. I'm asking for wisdom, but I don't know. Maybe not. Like, I don't know if I can take it.
Yeah.
Another thing that really touched me from Ecclesiastes, like personally, was I've been asking for wisdom. And when Solomon was talking about how this wisdom in itself is fleeting and is vanity, I was like, yo, like, that is so true, right?
It's crazy too.
Like, I'm asking for this wisdom, and I feel like, like that's what I need, right? That's what I need to be able to distinguish between good and bad, and to be able to distinguish on how to speak to people about God, and how to hopefully, like, open their eyes somehow, and all of these things. And I just realize, like, what are you gonna do with this wisdom at the end of the day? It's vanity in itself, is vanity. So I shouldn't even attach myself so much to that, like, ask from God, right? Like, I should be humble in that sense. I shouldn't be like, give me that wisdom, because that's how I'm gonna be fulfilled and all of that.
I felt that for sure, like almost like idolizing wisdom, like making wisdom more important than, like, what does Jesus prioritize, right? He says, first and greatest commandment is love God, right?
Love, yeah.
It's love, right? And it's like, as much as it would be really nice for me to be like, it's like understanding everything. That's the first most important thing, because then it would be straightforward and it would make sense, and I could accomplish it or I could fail. It would be straightforward, and that's how my brain works. But that's not what Jesus said, right? Jesus said love is the most important thing, right? And that's not only an abstract thing, but it has to be a genuine thing, right? And so I can't just push my way through it or whatever. Like it's such a different way of viewing things, because it's so easy to be like, the more I know, the better I can act, the better I can understand the world. But something that I realize is, it's like, okay, the wisdom that God has given me, am I applying it, right? Because I feel like if I live my entire life not learning any more wisdom and just growing in faith and growing and learning how to use it and growing in love, it's like I would make mistakes here and there, but that's going to happen no matter what, right? At the end of the day, if I know God and I grow in love, that's way more important than growing in wisdom, right? And it is an interesting thing too, because King Solomon, he was also at the top in terms of wisdom, right? He was wiser than anybody else. And he's saying, this is kind of a curse almost.
Yeah.
It's like, I understand it all. And because I understand it all, it's like he can't have happiness in a moment. Like, you see, like, him talking even about just, like, he says laughter is fleeting. Like, like laughter, like, that's just like a part of life. Like, you just hear a joke, you laugh, right? But it's like, for him, it's like he was thinking so much, and this wisdom was so deeply ingrained in him, and this, like, sense that everything's meaningless, that he wouldn't even be able to laugh or he's find enjoyment in the moment, because he was just always thinking about how meaningless life is, right? And it's like that wisdom it becomes a curse in terms of, like, actually enjoying life and things like that. So it is an interesting thing to think about. Like,
so I guess the solution here is, if you have everything that you can have, just like in terms of materialistic things, then just hope to God that you do not have the wisdom to to realize how fleeting these things are. That's a joke. So the verse you were talking about, Ecclesiastes 7:3, or actually he mentioned laughter and sorrow multiple times, but sorrow is better than laughter, for by a sad countenance the heart is made better.
Yeah, that's almost the same idea in James, when he talks about, like, like consider it pure joy when you go through trials, because
Yeah.
the testing of your faith produces perseverance. That's almost what I think of. It's like,
That is too what I think of. And like every growth in this life has started with sorrow.
yeah,
So we definitely need sorrow.
yeah. But it can be a hard thing to accept, for sure, that is the path.
That is the path, yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's like they're very fundamental ideas in like our minds and like deep in our hearts that we need to like, they need to click. But the only way they can click is if we deeply and personally experience these things, so that realization can come to us. Otherwise, like anybody could say anything to anyone, right? Like it does not click unless you can really see what that means.
Yeah, no, that, and even the idea of like God's love, right? Like saying Jesus loves me countless times growing up, but it's like, yeah, until it means something to me, it doesn't mean something to me, right?
Exactly.
It's like, yeah, even thinking about like scripture memory, like all these verses and things like that I memorized when I was younger, is like they're coming back to me now, and it's like they're valuable to me now. But when God hadn't like made a change in my life, is like they didn't mean anything to me. It was just words, whatever. And now it almost becomes like personal. So it's interesting how that works.
Yeah, I love this like passage when Solomon goes, "And so I said in my heart, as it happens to the fool, it also happens to me. And why was I then more wise? Then I said in my heart, this also is vanity, for there is no more remembrance of the wise than the fool forever, since all that now is will be forgotten in the days to come. And how does a wise man die? As the fool." The stuff is so deep. Like it's so good.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed reading that.
The same fate overtaking the wise and the fool is like, yeah.
Yeah.
It kind of puts things into perspective, especially in terms of like gratefulness and generosity. I feel like those are the two biggest things that are kind of my takeaways. Is it's like, yeah, when you're poor, you're gonna be unhappy, sure, but when you're rich, you're also gonna be unhappy. So we can conclude it's not the money that makes the happiness, right? And so being grateful for what you do have it's such an important skill to condition your mind into doing, because it gives energy and it makes everything a thing of worship to God, right? And yeah, like being grateful is very, very important. And it gives you kind of a perspective, because you kind of say, it's like, God, thank you for this money, this whatever that you give me now. It's like, it's yours, right? You've given it to me, right? This is the whole idea of like tithing, right? It's like we're on borrowed time. Everything we have is borrowed. And so we give back to God because it's all God's anyway, right? It could go away that fast, right?
Yeah. And I often find too that like the more you honestly don't have materialistic things, the more access you have to that spiritual realm where you can actually be grateful for how little you have. Like we look overseas at countries that are extremely poor and people who live like they literally sleep on dirt every day, and yet they somehow thank God every day, you know? And here I am like complaining because I don't know, something happened at work, you know? And then you realize you're like, well, at least I have work. At least I'm getting paid.
Yeah.
At least there's all these things we just tend to ignore because we're put in such a culture where it's like immediate
gratification.
Immediate gratification. And like we want to order something. Okay, I can order online. Like everything we need can be there and quick. And so our mind is programmed to do that. Sometimes the simpler life is, the bigger the window is to actually accept God's love and have that gratitude for him and for the things that he does. So we come from dust and we return to dust. What's in the middle? What's the point?
Well, yeah, that's the question, eh? That's
no
where you
big deal. Yeah.
turn to the end. Turn to the end of Ecclesiastes, because it's like if you think, well, yeah, just coming back, because this kind of ties it together. Coming back to the first time I was reading Ecclesiastes, because everyone kind of thought I was like nuts. You're nuts, right? You're just like, this is the most depressing thing I've ever read. Like, this is gonna make me depressed, right? For me, I was like, this is what I think about all the time. I never thought God thought about. I never thought the church thought about. I was like, this is just like it almost felt like I was asking these questions, but it wasn't like that wasn't really allowed, you know? But it's like something to remember as a Christian is we invite questions, right? We invite like scrutiny, not because it's like, oh, we got to make sure that we're accountable. Like obviously that, but like even more so, it's because God is bigger than us, right? And so if the truth is here, we're here, and someone else's opinion is here, we can still learn something from them, right? We can still get closer to the truth, right? And so keeping ourselves accountable, and like if this person has a question and they're like, why this? And it's like way outside, it's easy for us to just be like, no, we know that's not right. But we can still gain some perspective and get a little bit kind of closer to the truth. And yeah, so for me, it was hard because I felt like these questions were like kind of, I wasn't allowed to ask them almost. And seeing that he not only asked the questions, but he wrote a book about it, and he thought that it was so valuable that people needed to hear it. And so it's in the Bible, right? It's for so many people to hear and to see, because it's such an essential part of our existence is recognizing that it's wild, even the fact that we do exist, right? Even the like scientifically, the fact that we live at all, the fact that we live on Earth, like if you don't let that be a big deal, like if that is not like shocking to you, that it's like I live and I breathe and I have feelings, and like you said, right, I have feelings that I think are important, right? It's like that's just, that in and of itself is wild. And so Ecclesiastes for me, it really brought that into perspective. And then I was like, so I was reading through it and I was just eating it up. I was like, yeah, you're right. Pleasure's meaningless. Yeah, I've seen that. And then it's like, yeah, you're right. You know, wisdom's meaningless. It's like, yeah, I've seen that because I've tried and it's whatever. And I keep going. It's like, working hard is meaningless. Toil's meaningless. Pleasure's meaningless. Whatever. I'm like,
what do you want me to do?
Exactly.
Like, just sit here and do absolutely nothing at all.
Exactly. And so I was eating it up, and it's not a super long book, so I got to the end pretty fast. And when it comes, there's kind of like two narratives going on. There's King Solomon, who's talking for most of the book, but there's a little introduction at the start where they introduce him, and then there's a little portion at the end where they talk again. And we're not exactly sure who this other narrator is, but at the end, he talks about, he's like, the king, the teacher, he was wise.
The preacher,
the preacher in ESV is wise in all these different ways, right? And so he did a great job giving wisdom to other people and giving knowledge to other people. And then he says, now that all has been said, here's the conclusion of the matter. He says, fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. For God will bring everything into judgment, whether it is good or evil. And that's at the end of the day exactly it. And if you're unsatisfied with the existence of God, it's like that's a different issue altogether. But like if you are able to look around and recognize, everything's meaningless. This super wise man saw that, right? And he still saw, he was like, all that we have is to serve God, right? And so there's still that belief portion for sure, but that's all that we have, right? Everything else is meaningless, and our purpose here is to serve him, right? Inherently, we are made to serve God. And so it's like, sorry.
Yeah. I have trouble sometimes with everything is meaningless, because it's like, well, yeah, but God brought me here. So I'm personally not meaningless, right? Like he loves me, right? But it's like everything is vanity, right? Like this podcast is vanity. All this hard work I put in. But that's the truth of it. That's the truth of it. And honestly, like coming to peace with that idea would honestly probably allow me to perform better on this podcast. Not gonna lie, because it's like you put so much pressure and you're like, well, this is gonna, like, this has to go this way and this. And it's like realizing, like, pressure off. Like, it doesn't really matter. Like, what's the worst case scenario? Nobody watches it. Okay, cool. Like,
yeah, exactly. It's like
things like that, it's, materialistic things are vain, right? They're not lasting. And it's that idea that we need to get into our minds. But there was another part to what Solomon was saying that also was really interesting to me, seeing like, wow, this is in the Bible. Like they're telling you to eat and drink and enjoy the work of your labor.
Yeah.
Again, like what you were saying, it's like you read a little bit and it's like, this is in vain, and your labor is in vain, and this is in vain. And you're like, well, okay, then I might as well just go, I don't know,
be a hermit or something. Yeah. It's like, what is the point? Yeah. Right.
It's like, what's the point? But then he goes on and he says this one passage that I also really, really liked. It says, this is Ecclesiastes 5:18 to 20. Here is what I've seen. It is good and fitting for one to eat and drink and to enjoy the good of all his labor in which he toils under the sun, all the days of his life which God gives him, for it is his heritage. As for every man to whom God has given riches and wealth and given him power to eat of it, to receive his heritage and rejoice in his labor, this is the gift of God. For he will not dwell unduly on the days of his life, because God keeps him busy with the joy of his heart. And that last sentence, says it all, right? It's like, okay, well, God is going to give me, I'm still going to work. Just because work is vanity, it doesn't mean I'm going to stop going to work. I will go to work and I will make this money. And the Bible is saying, enjoy the good that you're making out of your labor. It is your heritage. But he's also really emphasizing this point that it is still the gift of God. But then if you go further, you will not dwell unduly on the days of your life. You will not attach to your life if you really have surrendered everything to God, right? He's still going to give you all these things. He's going to give you the money. He's going to give you the shelter. He's going to give you the husband, the kids. Like, he's going to give you what your heart desires. But he doesn't want you to attach to the things that are in vain.
Yeah, that's exactly it, right? It's like, what's the point, right? It's almost it's more of an issue of priorities than anything, right? Because it's not that work is evil, right? That's not what he says.
No.
He doesn't say pleasures are evil. He says they're in vain, right? And there's another portion where he says there's a time and place for everything, right?
Yeah.
And that's exactly it, right? If we make pleasure our idol, right? And we make immediate satisfaction our idol, right? That's like, there's times where you're gonna, like, immediate satisfaction is like fine, right? Maybe that's just like you do something and there's a result. Like, maybe, I don't know, this isn't like super immediate, but like you work out and then you see a change, right? Like, that's satisfaction. That's fine, right? And there are times where that's okay and that's good, but it's more about the priority, right? That's not what's most important, right? Your work isn't what's most important, your pleasure. And so that's more the thing that I think is kind of needs to be put into perspective, right? It's like, if you truly believe Ecclesiastes, it's not like you're gonna it's not like you have to, like, maybe this is, you do want to quit your job or whatever, but it's not like you have to quit your job and just go like do whatever. It's like, you can be being grateful, like I was saying before, right? It's like being grateful for what you do have that's God's gift to you, right? Is what you have. And so being grateful for it is another form of worship. Being grateful for what you do have. You can't let that be God. You can't put that higher than anything else. And that's the most important thing, I think.
Yeah. Realizing that all of these things are actually a gift and not dwelling, but also that he will fill you with joy that will like sort of give you, this is what I think of. It's giving you this momentum that you don't even, you don't have time to stop and dwell on the things that you have. And that's big, right?
Yeah.
Like, imagine just like me like putting this podcast together and I'm just like so focused on the future that I never stop and be like, wow, look at what I did, you know?
Yeah.
And he'll give you that. He'll give you that joy and that momentum to serve him, live for him, rather than look back and be like, well, I own all of these things.
Yeah. And even, the idea of the time, right? There's a time to be passionate, right? There's a time to have an idea and just go for it, right? And just absolutely pursue it. And then there's a time where it's like, it's time for bed, right? You can't just keep going 24/7, right? There's
I'm
a time.
Strict with that time.
Right?
No, like, seriously.
Yeah, but it's important, right?
Yeah.
Because if you let yourself go, you don't like in terms of like, if I have an idea, just go, never stop. It's like, obviously this is an extreme, but you would never sleep, right?
Yeah.
And there's a time for both, right? And so if we don't give ourselves adequate time to rest, then we can't. And that's kind of, for me, is something that signals when I've kind of gone too far in terms of idolizing busyness and idolizing getting things done, is when I don't feel I can't just sit. I can't just sit and be. I can't be at rest. I can't like go for a walk or something like that without being anxious or having things on my mind or whatever. And obviously that's always going to come to some degree, but that's like one of the most important things, I think, is realizing there's a time to be busy and there's a time to rest, and you have to keep that balance. And God knows that, right? He says it. It's like there is a time for everything, and we just can't say anything is not inherently above anything else, right? Any earthly thing, right?
Mhm.
And so things that come like there's like friendship, right? He's just like a cord of three strands is not easily broken, right? Like being in groups and being in community, that's huge, right? That's a good thing, right? And everyone's like, all humans are a child of God, right? That's huge. That's a good thing. Those are like fundamental things. And God made you, God loves you, whatever. Those are like the most important things that you gotta hold on to. But apart from that, it's like if you feel you are loving God, you're loving others, and you're like firm in yourself, like everything else is kind of just on the same level, right? It's like God up here and literally everything else in the universe down here, right? And as long as we can kind of keep that, it's okay, right? But at the moment that we put pleasure or toil or whatever on a higher standing, that's when we see these issues that Solomon mentions.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so the bigger picture is we're here on this earth, probably not by choice. Nobody chose to be here, right? Okay, we're here on this earth not by choice. We were born from two parents. We have to live this life until a certain point, and at the end, me and you believe that there is an afterlife. So if that's the bigger picture, right? Like I know a lot of people are into, conspiracy theories. So just think about it, right? If that is the case and there is an eternal life and we are here for a reason and we're not just random cells, what does that mean? How does that change your life? How does that change the way you live? So let's actually go back to how that changed things for you, that realization. So you said you got a lot of peace from it, right? Is there anything else specific that?
Yeah, it was a very interesting time for me. All I felt was peace and gratitude to God that he had filled me with this peace and that he was there for me, right? That's all I felt, right? I wasn't worried about the best way to serve him or like whatever. I was just like, I brought everything to him. I prayed about everything, and that was about it, right? I brought everything. I was like, God, if you really want me to do something, like make it evident to me. I'm here. Send me. And that is all I did. And I just felt at peace. And I just felt like, this is crazy, God. Like, this is crazy that you let me have this much peace and this much joy and just be okay with life. It's like, how does that work? But from other people's perspective, like I've talked to some people and like people who were close to me, like my parents and things like that. And they saw a genuine change in my actions and in what I prioritize. And I was more like engaged in conversation. I was more present and I loved people more. Right. And like, it's not like a pride thing, but it's like, that was a thing that had changed in me. Right. When in my mind, I was just like, I'm just experiencing God, right? He's just giving me peace. Yeah. And that's all that was on my mind. Right. And he used that to be like, here, you're gonna be my vessel. You're gonna spread love to all these people, and people are gonna look at you and be like, "Wow, he's joyful. Like that's crazy. Where does he get that from?" Right? And that in and of itself is enough. He doesn't ask us to slave away every day, just like whatever, just like in misery, just doing his grueling work. Right? That's not what he asks of us. Right? He has mercy on us, just as he has mercy on us eternally. He has mercy on us now, and he says, You're okay where you're at, right? Wherever you're at, wherever you're feeling, you're okay there. It just changed my perspective. Like when it became not just a head thing of, oh yeah, everything's meaningless, whatever. And then I just sit and be kind of empty and depressed. It was like, everything's meaningless.
I gotta do stuff.
I gotta do stuff, right? I can do stuff,
Isn't
right?
that like ironic though?
It is. Because all it took was like seeing that somebody else saw that, right? Kind of like the idea of like bringing it before God, like reading Ecclesiastes, it was just like, I felt like I wasn't alone, right? I felt like that was a valid thing to take. That was a valid stance to take. It was okay for me to feel like everything was meaningless, right? Because that affected me in a lot of ways, right? Like it's hard for me sometimes to hang out with friends, to go to school, whatever, because I was like, there's no point, right? And so it's easy, like you can call it depression, and that may be an aspect of it, but for me mentally, it was just like my heart was just empty. But then when that everything is meaningless kind of actually like went into my heart, it's like understanding God gave me strength, right? It was like everything's meaningless, but God has a plan for me, and I'm going to heaven, right? Like nothing of my own accord, just because Jesus sacrificed for me. He's given me this humongous gift. And when that actually like sunk in, it was just like I had love to give and give and give and give, because it was like I can give all that I have because Jesus is there for me. And so when that was my priority, it changed everything, because I was able to see kind of the bigger picture, right? The eternal perspective. It's a tricky thing because it's so easy for worries of life and things like that to get in the way, but it's such an important thing to remind yourself of what is actually important, right? What is actually fundamental, because at the end of the day, those are the only things that are gonna last, right?
Yeah. That's really beautiful that you were only focused on one aspect, and it's like, okay, God, like, thank you for taking away my anxiety and giving
Yeah,
me some
exactly.
peace. But while to the outside and to the people around you, they were seeing a completely different version of you, which that's a blessing. That's
Yeah.
good. So how often do you have to sort of remind yourself?
Yeah, this is one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot, because I feel like it's almost like since then, right, which was years ago, it almost feels like simultaneously like the aspect of like I'm almost coasting on a high, right? That's kind of one area that my brain goes, and then there's another aspect of just believing that something is true. And I think the idea of like coasting on a high is just actually not really true, because there have been highs and lows since then, right? Everything's changed, but it's kind of I've had that assurance, and that's more the thing that I felt that I was missing before, was the assurance that God is there and that it's going to be all right. And that's something, yeah, I need to remind myself of very, very regularly, especially like anxiety. Like it went away for a time, right? But that's not like, that's something I struggle with to this day, right? Like there are days recently I wake up and my heart's just beating really, really fast, and I like wake up like whatever, like having a panic attack or something like that. And that's like, that's still scary, but it's like I can remind myself, I can remember back to those times and remember God's faithfulness, not only as like, oh, he was faithful to Moses in the Old Testament, but he was faithful to me, right? He was there for me. And when I gave things to him, when I actually gave him my emotions and showed, like, gave him where I was at, he made something out of that, right? And he gave me peace, which is something that he promises, right? He says, if you are worried about anything, present your requests to God, our prayer or petition, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds, right? And I think in a lot of ways that works mentally with like sickness and stuff like that, giving that up to God, but also emotionally, like what you're feeling, if you give that up to God, he can also make a change in that, right? He can make a change in your heart, in who you are. And so it's definitely something I have to remind myself of, like, absolutely daily. Like, morning devotions for me are so important, not because I'm like fantastic at them or anything like that, but because I need the reminder, because my brain will automatically slip back into habits of anxiety and worry and all these different things. So I would say, yeah, at least daily. It increases with frequency as I get older and as I understand more. But yeah, like prayer
but you
regularly.
know, like, you know the process, right?
Yeah, that's exactly
You
right.
found the process, and now you just have to, you know, when the issue comes, you know it's happening, and then you have to remind yourself of it. Where do you think the devil plays a role in all of this, in the bigger picture?
Yeah, I think just in the same way, if I don't give God anything, he can his will be done no matter what. But if I don't give him anything, if I don't give him any trust, if I never trust him, he can't prove that he's faithful, right? If I never am like, okay, God, please help me with this, he can never prove that he would help, that he helps me with this, right? So if we don't give something to God, he can't make a change in us that we don't give him something for. And obviously that's a very conceptual thing, because God can do anything. But I think it's very much the same way with the devil. Is in opportunities, like, the devil is infinitely weaker, right? On just like a plain scale, God is infinitely bigger than the devil. But when those opportunities, those temptations arise, whatever those may be, that's where the devil like takes a foothold, right? And it's like for me, a lot of those are like, oh, like all this stuff you've been believing, it's like you're just believing it because that's what's convenient, because that's how you've grown up, whatever. And that's a lie of the devil, because I know that's not what happened, right? I could have gone a different direction, and God changed me, and I've stayed this way. But there's so many things like that where I think the devil kind of takes worries and takes insecurities and turns them into temptations to think other ways, right? And kind of try to weaken our foothold, right? Especially as Christians who have accepted Jesus into our hearts. It's like he's looking for any way he can to make that connection like further apart, right? Like in that time where I was feeling God's peace, it's like if I could be like, oh wait, I'm not reading my Bible enough. Shoot, I need to be anxious about that, right? And then I'm not living in the moment, right? It's like if I let that anxiety actually take hold, that is a temptation from the devil, just as a temptation to sin is a temptation from the devil, right? And so I think that's the biggest kind of aspect is the devil can only take opportunities that we give him, right? And so we've got to be very careful with what we're telling ourselves, especially when we're tired, had a long day or something like that. Like, oh, I just watched my show. That's going to solve everything, right? Be careful with things like that, because that God, like the devil can take hold of things like that, right?
Right.
If we let those things actually become idols. And so I think the devil is powerless in the face of God, but if we give him room, he will take advantage.
But do you think the devil also sort of starts these? Like it sounds like you're saying like, oh, if I already have some like maybe selfish thought or something to feed the flesh, or and then he'll kind of take opportunity of that. But don't you think the devil also comes with lies, with the anxiety? Like, was it coming from you, or is it definitely fueled from the devil, but what's the source, you know?
That's a very tricky thing, because we are inherently broken and sinful people living in a inherently broken and sinful world. And so from our birth, we're disfigured, right?
And I've heard that before, is that like, yeah, the devil has just like sort of did his job. He's leaving people like more than we know. Like a lot of the evil in the world actually is like is outsourced from us. And because he sort of started this, you know, he started selfishness, he started self-love and like instant gratification and just that curiosity about the unknown. And you're like, oh, well, I want to know what that's like, and I want to do that, and I want to do that. And you don't want to feel, it's like this narcissistic culture almost, like I'm gonna get this because I said I want it.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be left in the dark. I want to know what's up, you know?
Yeah. It's like a lack of trust, right? Just like Adam and Eve in the garden. It's it's a different situation because they didn't have any knowledge of what like sin was, but they knew they were disobeying God, right? They knew this is what God said. He didn't say that, right? And you kind of see in between is the devil being like, oh no, God didn't say that, right? God said that because he doesn't love you, because he doesn't want you to be like him, right? If you eat the fruit, you're gonna be like him, right? And so that's where the devil kind of takes hold, right? But at the end of the day, is like it was Eve's decision to eat the fruit, and then it was Adam's decision to eat the fruit, right? And so it's a tricky thing, because I think saying that it comes from ourselves, it can be easy to like beat ourselves up, because it's like, oh, that's just like mine. But we are inherently sinful, right? Like as Christians, we believe that original sin is there, that when from birth there is sin in our hearts, right? Yeah. And we just kind of, that's our lot. We just kind of have to learn to deal with that. And so I think,
and our flesh is weak as well, and that's also a known thing and a very experienced thing, right? That our flesh is weak. Paul, like if Paul is writing about his flesh and saying, God, I can't wait to be outside of this flesh, that I don't have to deal with these temptations anymore. Yeah. That's powerful, right? It is tricky in the sense that we could start blaming ourselves for everything, but it's also important to understand we are corrupted. Our flesh is corrupted. Yeah. There is a seed of corruption in our hearts that longs to do things that we shouldn't do. It's curious. Like I actually felt that so deeply like a couple days ago. I don't know why, and I don't know what brought it to me, but I just like pictured this person being like, hey, do you want to go see like what's going on in this place? And I'm like, yeah, because otherwise, you know, you can just turn around and walk the other way, but it feels like something is just off, like deep down. It's like, what am I missing out on, you know? And it's like, I looked at that and I was like, that is literally what it is to want to eat from the tree, you know?
To be tempted,
to be tempted and to want like, why would you have a desire to do something, like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
on one
Like, where does
sense,
that
it's
come
like,
from? Like, logically speaking, where does that come from?
because on one side, it's like humbling. It's humbling to just turn around and walk the other way and be like, no, I have nothing to do with this.
Yeah.
But on the other side, you're like, but I want to know.
Yeah.
And I just felt that deep source of corruption in our heart. And that's exactly what that thought was, probably in Eve's mind, right? When she's like, okay, let's see what this fruit is really about.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, it is an interesting thing, right? Because God made us creative and he made us curious, right? And we can use that for good, but just as easily we can use that for evil, right? Like we can learn about science and about how cool the world is and how great God made it, right? But we can also use that curiosity to kind of indulge, right? And the devil, I think, works in ways that we kind of undermine as like, oh, like it's not that big a deal and things like that. Because I think it's important to remember that every temptation is an opportunity to give that up to God, right? And so it's easy for, at least for me, to, when I feel tempted, to feel like that's a sin in and of itself, right? And it's like, that's not like Jesus was tempted, right? It says in the Bible, Jesus was tempted in every way that we were, right? And so that's kind of a thing to remember, is it's like, when the devil does tempt us with something evil, it's like, we can please God by saying no, right? Like Jesus being tempted in the wilderness, right? He hadn't eaten for 40 days. And then the devil's like tempting him, and he's like quoting scripture to the devil, right? And that's like, that is pleasing to God, right? It's like taking all these lies and replacing them with truth, right? And I think that's why scripture memory is such an important thing, because there are times where we are weak, right? There are times where we don't have whether that's emotional capacity or physical capacity to resist temptation, right? We don't have it in ourselves, right? But we need the Holy Spirit, and we need and God's word. Like, the Bible is literally God's word, right? So having that in our brains and having that as reminders is just such a huge and important thing. So yeah, it is a tricky thing to say, like, oh, it's just our sinful nature and it's not like the devil. But I think it is important to remember that it's like, we live in a broken world, and so sin is kind of indistinguishable, right? It's more about choosing to do good, because the default is to do bad. So yeah,
I like that. And the fact that we do need the Holy Spirit, to help us say no to these things. Yeah. So that's kind of the bigger picture. We got a good guy, God. We got a bad guy, the devil. And we got this life in between. We take nothing with us. None of our work, none of our money, we don't even take people with us. We might see them later, hopefully. But we take nothing with us. So we can probably wrap up here.
Sounds good.
I continue to think about this idea of living in peace in the presence of our Creator is to sort of zoom out and see the bigger picture. And I think the process of knowing God is that exact process of zooming out, except it is an infinite screen. Our lives aren't just about seeking things for ourselves. Careers, relationships, accomplishments, pleasures, all is vanity. While God, who is love, is eternal. When we focus on Him, everything else will fall into place. And I often find myself worrying about the future, about my career, relationships, and how others perceive me. But the more I zoom out and the more I see the bigger picture, the more I realize that God has already promised everything that I need: peace, love, joy, and purpose. Okay, so we'll call it here. Thank you, Sam, for joining me for today's episode.
No problem.
Really appreciated it. If today's episode has sparked something meaningful for you or helped you see things differently, feel free to like and subscribe, and please leave any questions or thoughts in the comments, and let's continue to explore the unseen together. I'll see you guys soon. God bless.